A CIA paper, Deceptive Maxims, Fact and Fiction. I'm going to be going over some of these maxims. And you may ask, well, what does this have to do with territorial jurisdiction? Well, it has everything to do with the military and how the military works. The way you win wars is often through deception. Um, the way the way they've put out information, the way the military, the United States of America has put out information is um, captivatingly deceptive. Nobody knows what anything is, and I think that's kind of the point. So when we're looking for information and trying to figure out what's what and who's who and what person belongs under what law, it's really hard to figure this stuff out. So I think it's done intentionally, and it takes a really keen eye, and for me, just a lot of experience working with the Department of Defense as a regulatory enforcement specialist to understand this stuff. So I try to explain it to you, the civilians who've never been in the military. So Maxim 1, Magruder's principle, the exploitation of preconceptions. It is generally easier to induce an opponent to maintain a pre-existing belief than to present a notional evidence to change that belief. Thus, it may be more fruitful to examine how an opponent's existing beliefs can be turned to advantage than to attempt to alter these views. Perhaps the most striking application of this principle in military deception is to be found in the selection of the invasion site and cover plan for the D-Day invasion at Normandy. It is well established that Hitler and most, but not all, of his senior military advisors believed that the most likely place for the Allied invasion of Europe would be in the Pas-de-Calais region. Moreover, the Allies were aware of this belief, according to Cave Brown. They knew from Ultra, and particularly from the intercepts of Baron Oshima's, the Japanese ambassador at Berlin. Traffic, what Hitler expected the Allies to do. He expected them to land at the Pas de Calais, which he considered the logical point of attack. Indeed, so strong was this preconception that for several days after the invasion at Normandy, Hitler remained convinced that the invasion was merely a feint, whose purpose was to trick him into deploying his defensive forces wrongly. The Navy, too, considered the terrain unfavorable for large-scale landings, he declared. For the time being, he expected the decisive assault to take place in the vicinity of Calais, as though he were determined that the enemy, too, would prove him to have been right. For there, around Calais, he had, ever since 1942, been emplacing the heaviest model guns under many feet of concrete to destroy an enemy landing fleet. The preconception formed the basis for an elaborate deception plan keyed to reinforcement of this belief. If, according to Jervis, actors tend to perceive what they expect, then these expectations furnish greater leverage to a deception plan, a form of mental jiu-jitsu. Such a maxim, termed Magruder's principle by Lewin, appears to be well appreciated by deception planners and is consistent with numerous studies on the psychology of perception. David Muir, for example, recalled that one of the Brigadier Dudley Clark's inflexible rules for development of cover plans was that all cover plans should be based on what the enemy himself not only believes but hopes for. Clark was one of the leading deception architects for the British in North Africa and the Middle East, and, according to some, the best deception planner in World War II. There is ample historical evidence to confirm the efficacy of Magruder's principle. Figure 1 contains entries from the historical database described previously. These entries, including both strategic and tactical cases, are categorized according to whether or not deception was employed, whether or not plans were keyed to enemy preconceptions, and whether or not surprise was achieved. Analysis of these data show also in Figure 1 enable two conclusions to be drawn. First, historically, deception schemes have more often than not been keyed to enemy preconceptions, according to the data in 110 out of 131, or 84% of the cases. This supports the assertion that deception planners subscribe to the principle. Second, these data support the conclusion that when deception is keyed to enemy preconceptions, the probability of surprise is greater, though the overall degree of success, measured by the fraction of cases resulting in surprise, using deception is large, 123 out of 131, or 94% of the cases. A more disaggregated analysis is possible. Specifically, when deception is keyed to existing belief, surprise resulted in 106 out of 110, or 96% of the battles, whereas when this was not the case, surprise resulted in only 17 out of 21, or 81% of the battles, a statistically significant difference. But recall earlier disclaimers if this were a random sample. A puzzling aspect of the raw data concerns these situations where deception was not employed and plans were consistent with preconceptions. It would be expected that this would have a low incidence of surprise, yet all 8 cases, beware of small sample sizes, resulted in surprise, weak support for what some observers have termed the inevitability of surprise. The next principle suggests some reasons that might help explain the prevalence of surprise. Maxim 2 in the next video.